The morning of November 12th started like any other at Buckingham Palace. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. A cold fog hung over London's streets. Inside the palace gates, Royal Guard officer James Mitchell stood at his post. Watching the first delivery trucks arrive, James had been a guard for 7 years. He knew the routine. Morning deliveries came between 6 and 8. Flowers, documents, supplies for the kitchen, everything was logged. Everything was checked. Nothing unusual ever happened until that morning. A white van pulled up to the side gate. At 6:47 a.m., James noticed it immediately. The van had no company logo. No markings at all. Just plain white metal, slightly rusted around the edges. The driver wore a dark jacket and a cap pulled low over his face. James felt something twist in his stomach. Something wasn't right. The driver stepped out holding a medium-sized cardboard box. Brown tape wrapped around it multiple times. No return address. No proper label. Just a handwritten note that said, "For His Majesty Personal." "Morning," the driver said, his voice flat. He didn't make eye contact. James didn't move. "I'll need to see your identification and delivery authorization." The driver hesitated, just for a second. But James caught it. 7 years of training made him notice these things. The slight shift in posture. The way the man's fingers tightened around the box. "It's urgent," the driver said. "Direct request from the King's office." "Then you'll have documentation," James replied, his hand moving slowly toward his radio. "Before you hear what happened next. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. We share the most incredible real-life stories you won't believe actually happened. Now, back to the gate. The driver's eyes darted to the radio on James's belt. "Look, I'm just doing my job. I was told to deliver this personally. Someone will be expecting it." James kept his voice calm but firm. Nobody enters and nothing enters without proper clearance. That's protocol. The fog seemed to grow thicker around them. In the distance, James could hear the sounds of London waking up. Cars on the main road. A dog barking somewhere. But here at this gate, everything felt suspended in time. The driver placed the box on the ground. "Fine, I'll leave it here then." "You can't do that either," James said. He pressed the button on his radio. "Control, this is Eastgate. I need a supervisor and security team immediately. Suspicious delivery." The driver's face changed. The casual mask dropped. For just a moment, James saw something else there. Panic? Fear? He couldn't be sure. "Wait," the driver said, backing toward his van. "I'll just take it back." "Forget it. Stop right there," James ordered. "Don't move." But the driver was already climbing into the van. The engine roared to life. Within seconds, the white van was speeding away, tires screeching on the wet pavement. James stood alone at the gate. And there, sitting on the cold ground just a few feet away, was the box, still taped shut. Still labeled for the King. His radio crackled. "Mitchell, report. What's the situation?" James stared at the box. Should he approach it? Move it? Touch it? Every training scenario ran through his mind. In 7 years, he'd never faced anything like this. "We have an abandoned package," he said into the radio, his mouth suddenly dry. Driver fled the scene. "The box is addressed to His Majesty." Silence on the other end. "Then, do not approach. Evacuate the area. Full security protocol. Now." Within 2 minutes, the alarms would sound. Within 5, the entire East Wing would be evacuated. And within 10 minutes, the story of what was inside that box would change everything James thought he knew. It's about his job. But standing there in the fog, watching the box sit silent and still, James had no idea that he'd just intercepted something that would put the entire palace on lockdown, and the terror was only beginning. Asterisk. The sirens started exactly 90 seconds later, not the loud public alarms. These were internal. A low, pulsing sound that every palace staff member knew meant one thing: active threat. James backed away from the box, his training taking over. 20 meters. That's what the manual said. 20 meters minimum from any suspicious package. He moved behind the concrete barrier, his heart hammering in his chest. The palace transformed around him. Windows that had been dark suddenly flooded with light. Doors sealed shut with heavy metallic clicks. He could see shadows moving behind curtains as security teams swept through hallways. Evacuating everyone to safe zones, Captain Sarah Reynolds arrived first. She was the head of palace security, a former military officer with 15 years of experience. She'd seen combat in 2 war zones. But even she looked tense as she approached James's position. "Talk to me, Mitchell," she said, crouching beside him. Her eyes never left the box. James explained everything. The unmarked van, the nervous driver, the way he fled the moment backup was called. Sarah's jaw tightened with each detail. "You did good," she said quietly. "Real good." The bomb disposal unit arrived in an armored vehicle. 3 specialists in full protective gear stepped out. They moved with careful precision, setting up equipment around the perimeter. Cameras, sensors, tools James didn't recognize. One specialist approached the box with a handheld scanner. The device beeped in word. Everyone watched in absolute silence. James realized he was holding his breath. The specialist's voice came through the radio, muffled by his helmet. No explosive signature detected. No chemical agents. No biological markers. Sarah exhaled slowly. "Then what is it?" "Unknown. But it's definitely something organic. I'm reading heat patterns. Very faint. Heat patterns. That meant something alive. Or something that had been alive recently." James felt sick. "Could it be an animal?" Sarah asked. "Possible. Recommend immediate X-ray before opening." They brought in the portable X-ray machine. It looked like something from a science fiction movie. 2 panels that created an image of anything between them. The specialist positioned it carefully around the box. The image appeared on a tablet screen. Sarah leaned in close, studying it. Her face went pale. "Everyone back," she said. Her voice was different now, harder. "Get the containment team. Now, what is it?" James asked, but Sarah was already on her phone. "This is Reynolds. I need the Home Office on the line immediately. And get me someone from MI5. We have a situation." MI5. The British intelligence agency. James's mind raced. What could possibly be in that box that required intelligence services? More vehicles arrived. Black SUVs with tinted windows. Men and women in suits, looking grim. They conferred with Sarah in hushed tones, glancing repeatedly at the box that still sat undisturbed on the ground. An hour passed, then another. The sun climbed higher, burning away the fog. But the tension only grew thicker. Finally, a decision was made. They would open the box, but under full containment protocol. A clear plastic tent was erected over it. Negative air pressure to prevent anything from escaping. Cameras recording from multiple angles. 2 specialists entered the tent, wearing full hazmat suits. James watched on a monitor as they carefully cut through the tape. The cardboard flaps lifted slowly. One specialist reached inside. He pulled out a smaller box. Black velvet, like a jewelry case. But there was something else. Papers, documents, the specialist held. One up to the camera. Sarah's face went completely white. She grabbed the radio. "Stop everything. Lock down this information immediately. Nobody speaks about this. To anyone. That's an order." James couldn't see what was written on the paper, but he saw Sarah's hand shaking as she read it. He saw the way the MI5 agents exchanged looks, the way everyone suddenly seemed afraid. One agent made a phone call, brief, urgent. When he hung up, he turned to Sarah. "We need to wake the king. He needs to see this personally." "Is that serious?" Sarah asked. "It's worse than serious, Captain. This is a direct threat. Not just to His Majesty, to the entire royal family." James felt cold despite the morning sun. A direct threat. The words hung in the air like poison. Inside the containment tent, the specialist lifted something else from the velvet box. It was small, metallic. It caught the light as he turned it over in his gloved hands. Sarah leaned toward the monitor, her face inches from the screen. "Is that what I think it is?" The specialist's voice crackled through the radio. "Confirmed. It's a key. Old design. Probably 19th century. A key to what?" Someone asked. Nobody answered. But James noticed something. Every single person who could see that key, who could see those documents, looked absolutely terrified. And somewhere in the palace, King Charles was being woken up, being told that someone had sent him a delivery, a message, a threat, something that would make this day unforgettable. But the real question wasn't what was in the box. The real question was why someone wanted the king to see it. What did that key unlock? And what were those documents that made experienced security professionals look like they'd seen a ghost? James would find out soon enough. And when he did, he'd wish he'd never stopped that van at all. King Charles arrived at the Security Command Center 40 minutes later. He wore a simple suit, his face serious, but composed. Years of royal training meant he never showed panic. Even when everyone around him clearly felt it, James stood at attention as the king entered. He'd never been this close to His Majesty before. Never imagined his first real interaction would be like this. "Officer Mitchell," the king said, stopping in front of him. "You're the one who intercepted the package?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "Captain Reynolds tells me you followed protocol perfectly, that your instincts may have prevented something terrible." The king's eyes were kind, but James could see the worry behind them. "Thank you." James nodded, unable to speak. The king turned to Sarah. "Show me what was inside." They moved to a secure room. The velvet box sat on a metal table, now fully photographed and documented. Beside it, the documents were spread out in protective plastic sleeves. And there, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, was the key. King Charles stared at it for a long moment. His hand reached out, then stopped. "May I?" "It's been cleared, Your Majesty," one of the MI5 agents said. "No toxins. No traps." The king picked up the key. His fingers trembled slightly. "I know what this is," he said quietly. "Or rather, I know what it represents." Everyone waited. The room felt smaller somehow, suffocating. "This key," the king continued, "opens a vault in the Tower of London. A vault that hasn't been accessed in over 80 years. A vault that, according to official records, doesn't exist." Sarah leaned forward. "What's in the vault, Your Majesty?" "I don't know. My grandfather spoke of it once, when I was very young. He said there were secrets there. Documents that certain people wanted to remain buried forever. He told me that if anyone ever tried to use those secrets, it would shake the monarchy to its core." The king set the key down carefully. He picked up one of the documents. His face grew darker as he read. "This letter," he said, his voice tight, "is addressed to me personally. It says that the contents of that vault will be made public in 7 days unless I meet certain demands." "What demands?" Sarah asked. The king looked up. For the first time, James saw real fear in a royal's eyes. "They want me to abdicate, to step down from the throne, to publicly announce that the monarchy has been, in their words, corrupt and illegitimate for generations." Silence crashed over the room like a wave. "That's impossible," one agent said. "We can't let them blackmail the crown. And what if what's in that vault actually is damaging?" Another agent countered. "What if it's something we can't deny or spin?" King Charles set the paper down. "There's more. They've included photographs, partial documents. Enough to prove they have access to the vault. Enough to show that what they're threatening is real." James couldn't see them clearly from where he stood, but he heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath. "These are letters," she said. "Royal correspondence from World War II. And these numbers? Are these bank accounts?" "Swiss accounts," the king confirmed. "Opened in 1940. Significant amounts of money. Transferred from Nazi sources." The words hung in the air like a bomb. Nazi sources. During the war? Money going to British royals? Surely there's an explanation, Sarah said. Context we're missing. Perhaps the king said, but without seeing the full contents of the vault, we can't know. And that's exactly what they're counting on. The threat of exposure, the fear of what might be revealed. One of the MI5 agents spoke up. Your Majesty, we need to know who sent this. We've already started tracing the van. We have traffic camera footage. We'll find the driver. And what about the vault itself? Sarah asked. Can we access it? Secure whatever's inside before they release anything. The king shook his head. The vault is controlled by an automated system, a mechanism designed over a century ago. Only this key can open it. And I suspect that if we try to force entry, the contents will be destroyed automatically. So we're trapped, someone muttered. We have 7 days, the king said firmly. 7 days to find these people, to understand what they really want, and to decide how to respond. He looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. This stays contained. Complete secrecy. If word leaks to the press, if speculation begins, we lose control of the narrative. Understood? Everyone nodded. Officer Mitchell, the king said, turning back to James. You're part of this now. You saw that driver. You might be able to identify him. Captain Reynolds will brief you on what happens next. Yes, Your Majesty, James managed. As the king left the room, James felt the weight of what had just happened. He'd woken up this morning as a simple royal guard. Now he was involved in something that could potentially bring down the British monarchy. Sarah pulled him aside. You heard everything in there? That driver you saw? He's our only lead. We need you to work with our sketch artist. Every detail you can remember, the way he moved, his voice, anything. What if we can't find him in time? James asked. Sarah's expression was grim. Then in 7 days, secrets that have been buried for 80 years will become front-page news around the world. And nobody knows what happens after that. James thought about the driver's face, the fear he'd seen there. Whoever that man was, he wasn't working alone. This was planned, organized, professional, and somewhere out there, someone had access to a vault full of royal secrets. Someone who was willing to destroy the monarchy to get what they wanted. The question was, why? What could possibly be worth threatening the crown itself? James would spend the next several hours with sketch artists and intelligence analysts. He'd look at thousands of faces in databases. He'd describe every second of that encounter at the gate, but deep down he already knew something that terrified him. That driver hadn't looked like a criminal. He'd looked scared. Like someone who'd gotten in over his head. Like someone being controlled by something bigger. Which meant whoever was really behind this was still out. There, watching, waiting, counting down the 7 days until they released. Information that could change British history forever. By afternoon, they had a breakthrough. The traffic cameras caught the white van driving through 3 different intersections. The license plate was fake, but facial recognition software pulled a partial match on the driver. His name was David Harrow. 43 years old. Former military. Served in Afghanistan for 2 tours before receiving a medical discharge. No criminal record. No known political affiliations. He lived alone in a small flat in South London. He looks clean, Sarah said, studying the file. To clean. James agreed. When I saw him, he looked terrified. Not angry. Not ideological. Just scared. They assembled a team. 6 officers in plain clothes, 2 vehicles. The plan was simple. Knock on Harrow's door, bring him in for questioning. Find out who was really pulling the strings. James insisted on coming along. Sarah hesitated, then agreed. You're the only one who's seen him in person. You might notice something we'd miss. They drove through London in the afternoon traffic. James watched the city pass by. Normal people living normal lives. None of them knowing that somewhere in a vault, documents existed that might rewrite everything they knew about their country's history. Harrow's building was old. Brick facade, narrow stairs, paint peeling from the door frames. They approached his flat on the 3rd floor. Sarah knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder. "Mr. Harrow, this is the police. We need to speak with you." Silence. Sarah nodded to one of the officers, who produced a key from the building manager. The door opened with a soft click. The flat was dark. Curtains drawn. A smell hit them immediately. Something chemical. Something wrong. "Stay behind me," Sarah ordered, pulling out her flashlight. They moved through the entrance hall. The kitchen was empty. Dishes in the sink, a half-eaten meal on the counter. The living room showed signs of someone leaving in a hurry. Papers scattered across a desk. A laptop still open, screen dark. Then they found the bedroom, and everything changed. David Harrell lay on the bed, completely still. His skin was pale. Too pale. A glass sat on the nightstand beside him. Empty except for a thin residue at the bottom. Sarah checked his pulse, already knowing what she'd find. He's gone. Looks like poison. Self-administered. On the pillow beside Harrow's head was an envelope. Sarah picked it up carefully with gloved hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A letter. She read it aloud, her voice steady but quiet. "To whoever finds this, I'm sorry. They told me it would just be a delivery. A message. They said no one would get hurt. But I know now what I've become part of. I know what those documents will do. I can't live with that. I thought I was doing the right thing. Fighting corruption. Exposing truth. But the people I was working for, they don't care about truth. They care about power, about destruction. I don't even know who they really are. I only met one person. A woman. She called herself Elizabeth. That's all I know. I'm sorry to His Majesty. I'm sorry to Britain. I'm sorry for my weakness. David Harrow." James felt sick. This man, this scared veteran, had been used, manipulated, and when he realized what he'd done, he'd taken his own life rather than face it. "Elizabeth," Sarah repeated. "That's not much to go on." One of the officers was examining the laptop. "This has been wiped. Professional job. Everything's gone." Another officer searched the desk. "Wait, look at this." He held up a business card. Plain white. No name, no company. Just a phone number embossed in black ink. Sarah took the card. "Bag this. We'll trace the number." James was looking at something else. A photograph, half hidden under some papers. He pulled it out carefully. It showed Harrow in military uniform, standing with his unit. Young, proud, smiling. A man who'd served his country. A man who'd been broken by what came after. "He deserved better than this," James said quietly. Sarah put a hand on his shoulder. "They all do. The people they manipulate. The pawns they sacrifice. That's why we have to stop them." Back at Palace Security Headquarters, the investigation intensified. The phone number from the business card was traced to a burner cell, used 3 times in the past week, then destroyed. Dead end. But the intelligence analysts were working on something else. They'd been studying the documents from the Velvet Box, looking for any clue about who had accessed the vault. And they found something. The photographs, one analyst explained, pointing to detailed images on a screen. They were taken recently. You can see modern lighting equipment reflected in some of the glass cases. Whoever took these had professional gear. High-end cameras. "So they've been inside the vault," Sarah said. "More than that. Look at this." The analyst zoomed in on one photo. "See this shadow? It's partial, but you can make out a hand. And on the wrist, there's a watch. Very distinctive. Limited edition. Only 500 made worldwide." Another analyst was already searching. "Got it. Made by a Swiss company. They keep records of all buyers for pieces in this price range. Give me a few hours, I can get the list." It was progress. But time was slipping away. They had 6 days left. Less than a week before, whoever had those documents decided whether to release them. King. Charles called an emergency meeting with his closest advisors. James wasn't there, but Sarah told him about it afterward. The king had 3 options. Meet the demands and abdicate. Refuse and let them release the documents, or somehow find and stop them before the deadline. He chose option 3, Sarah said. We find them. Whatever it takes. That night, James couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Harrow's face. The fear in his eyes at the gate, the pale stillness in that bedroom. A man used and discarded by people who saw him as nothing more than a tool. Who was Elizabeth? Was that even her real name? And why did she want to destroy the monarchy? Was it ideology? Revenge? Or something else entirely? His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Development. Get back to HQ now. James dressed quickly and drove through the dark London streets. The palace was lit up, every window glowing. Inside headquarters, the mood was electric. Tense. Something had happened. Sarah met him at the door. Her face was a mixture of excitement and dread. They found the watch buyer. 500 sold worldwide. Only 3 in the UK. We've identified all 3 owners and, James asked. Sarah handed him a file. He opened it. Inside was a photograph. A woman, mid-40s, dark hair, sharp eyes. And beneath the photo, a name that made James's blood run cold. Elizabeth Ashworth. Former MI-Lo officer, decorated intelligence operative. She'd worked on some of the most sensitive operations in British history. She had clearance for information most people couldn't imagine existed. She'd retired 5 years ago. Quietly, no fanfare, no ceremony. She'd simply disappeared from public record, and now she was threatening to expose secrets that could bring down the crown. Why? James asked. Why would someone who spent her life serving the country do this? Sarah's expression was grim. That's what we need to find out. Because she's not just any former spy. She's one of the best. She knows how we operate, how we think, how we'll try to stop her. So what do? We find her before she finds us, and we pray we're not already too late. Elizabeth Ashworth had been a ghost for 5 years. No credit card transactions, no phone records, no digital footprint at all. For someone who'd spent decades in intelligence, disappearing completely was easy. But everyone makes mistakes. Everyone leaves traces. The question was whether they could find hers before time ran out. The investigation team worked around the clock. They pulled up everything from Ashworth's past. Her assignments, her contacts, her psychological evaluations. Somewhere in that history was a clue to where she'd gone and why she was doing this. James studied her file late into the night. Ashworth had been brilliant. Her record showed successful operations across 3 continents. She'd prevented terrorist attacks, exposed foreign agents, saved countless lives. Then, 5 years ago, something changed. Her last mission report was heavily redacted. Almost everything blacked out except a single line at the bottom. Operation terminated. Officer Ashworth relieved of duty. Psychological evaluation recommended. What happened on that last mission? James asked Sarah. That's classified above my level, Sarah admitted. But I made some calls. Called in favors. One of my old contacts in MI6 gave me something off the record. She pulled out a handwritten note. Ashworth was working on something connected to the royal family. Some kind of historical investigation. She found something that disturbed her. Something that made her question everything she'd believed about the institution she'd spent her life protecting. The vault, James said. She found out about the vault, more than that. According to my contact, she became obsessed. Started making accusations, demanding that certain documents be declassified. She claimed the public had a right to know. When her superiors refused, she wouldn't let it go. Eventually, they forced her into early retirement. James felt pieces clicking together. So this isn't just about destroying the monarchy. This is personal. She thinks she's exposing some great injustice. The most dangerous enemies are the ones who believe they're heroes. Sarah said quietly. The breakthrough came on day 4. A financial analyst noticed something. Ashworth had a nephew, Thomas Ashworth, who still lived in London. He was an antiques dealer, specializing in historical documents and artifacts. The vault's contents are over 80 years old, the analyst explained. If she wanted to verify what she had, she'd need an expert. Someone she could trust. They surveillanced the nephew's shop, a small place in Kensington, nestled between a cafe and a bookstore. Through the window, they could see shelves lined with old books, framed documents, vintage maps. Thomas Ashworth was 40 years old, thin, bookish, with wire-rimmed glasses. He lived above his shop, seemed to keep to himself. On the surface, completely ordinary, but cameras showed something interesting. Late at night, after the shop closed, someone would visit. They always wore dark clothes and a hood. Always stayed exactly 45 minutes. Always left through the back alley. That's her, Sarah said, watching the footage. Has to be. They set up an operation. Wait for her next visit. Surround the building. Take her peacefully if possible. They had 3 days left before the deadline. This might be their only chance. James was positioned in an unmarked car across the street. Sarah and her team were staged in multiple locations, invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. They waited as evening fell and the shop closed. Thomas locked the front door at 6 p.m. sharp. Lights went off. Street lamps flickered on. Then, at 11:47 p.m., a figure emerged from the shadows. Dressed in dark clothes, hood up, moving with purpose. The figure checked the street, then slipped into the back alley. That's her, Sarah's voice came through James's earpiece. All units, stand by. We move on my signal. James watched as the back door opened. The figure disappeared inside. Sarah counted down. 60 seconds. Give her time to get comfortable. We want her contained, nowhere to run. The seconds ticked by. James's heart pounded. They were so close. After 4 days of searching, they'd finally found her. 30 seconds, Sarah said. Teams 1 and 2, move to your positions. James saw officers moving silently through the darkness. Professional. Precise. They surrounded the building like a closing fist. All teams. Position, someone reported. Breach in 3, 2, 1. Go. The doors burst open simultaneously, front and back. Officers poured in, flashlights cutting through the darkness. James heard shouting, commands, the sound of something crashing, then Sarah's voice sharp with frustration. Clear, the main floor is clear. James got out of his car, moving closer. What was happening? More shouting from upstairs? Then silence. Long, terrible silence. Finally, Sarah emerged from the front door. Her face was pale. We've got Thomas. But she's not here. What? James couldn't believe it. They'd seen her go in. There's a tunnel, Sarah said. Under the shop, leads to the building next door. She was already gone before we breached. She knew we were coming. Inside, Thomas Ashworth sat in handcuffs, looking terrified. I didn't know this would happen, he kept saying. She's my aunt. She said she just needed help authenticating some documents. I didn't know. Where is she? Sarah demanded. I don't know. She never tells me. She just comes here, uses my equipment, and leaves. Please, I didn't mean to break any laws. They searched his equipment. Found the tunnel exit. Found evidence that Ashworth had been there less than an hour ago. But she was gone. Again, back at headquarters, the mood was dark. They'd been so close. But Ashworth had anticipated them. She'd known they'd find her nephew. She'd prepared an escape route. She's always 2 steps ahead, one agent said bitterly. But James was thinking about something else. About the way Thomas had looked when they found him. Genuinely scared. Genuinely confused. Like he didn't understand why armed police had just stormed his shop. He's telling the truth, James said. He really doesn't know where she is. Then we're back to nothing, Sarah said. 2 days left, and we have no idea where she'll strike next. That's when James's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then something made him pick up. Hello? The voice on the other end was calm, female, controlled. Officer Mitchell. I understand you've been looking for me. James's blood went cold. He looked at Sarah, mouthing it's her. Sarah immediately signaled to start a trace. My name is Elizabeth Ashworth, the voice continued, and I'm calling to give you one chance to do the right thing. What do you want? James asked, keeping his voice steady. I want you to understand something. The documents in that vault, they're not just embarrassing. They're proof. Proof that the monarchy has been built on lies, on corruption, on deals with enemies during our darkest hour. The British people deserve to know the truth. So this is about justice? James asked. This is about accountability, about ending a system that protects itself at the expense of everyone else. And David Harrow, James said, letting anger creep into his voice. Was his death about accountability too? Silence on the line. Long enough that James thought she might have hung up. Then Harrow was weak. I didn't force him to do anything. He made his own choices. You manipulated a damaged man, used him. Let him die thinking he was a traitor. We all make sacrifices for the greater good, Officer Mitchell. You're about to learn that yourself. The line went dead. The trace came back, another burner phone already destroyed, but Sarah was looking at something on her computer. Wait. Play that back. The audio recording of the call. They listened again. In the background, very faint, there was a sound. A bell. A church bell, ringing the hour. That's specific, Sarah said. That bell has a distinct tone. If we can identify which church, we might be able to narrow down her location. It was a thread, thin as spider silk. But it was all they had. 2 days left. And somewhere in London, Elizabeth Ashworth was preparing to release secrets that would change everything. The question was, could they find her before she pressed that button? Or would the monarchy's darkest secrets finally come to light? The audio experts worked through the night. They isolated the bell sound, analyzed its frequency, its resonance, its unique acoustic signature. By dawn, they had a match to St. Bartholomew's Church, a small, ancient building in East London. Built in the 1400s, its bell tower had a crack in the largest bell, creating a distinctive sound found nowhere else in the city. She's somewhere within hearing distance, Sarah said, studying a map. That gives us a radius of about 800 meters. They deployed surveillance teams across the area, cameras, listening devices. Officers in unmarked cars and disguised as locals, but they had to be careful. Ashworth was trained to spot surveillance. One wrong move, and she'd disappear again. James walked the streets around the church, trying to think like her. Where would someone hide if they knew the entire British intelligence apparatus was hunting them? Where could you stay anonymous in a city of 9 million people? The area was a mixture of old and new. Historic buildings converted into flats. Modern apartments squeezed between Victorian warehouses. Coffee shops. Small businesses. Hundreds of potential hiding spots. Then he saw it. A building directly across from the church. For stories. Old brick. But the top floor had been recently renovated. He could see new windows. Fresh paint. A rooftop access door. Perfect line of sight to the church bell tower. Perfect position to hear it ring every hour. And a rooftop position that would give her multiple escape routes if discovered. James radioed Sarah. I think I found her. They assembled quietly. No sirens, no obvious police presence. The building had 8 flats. They evacuated the residents carefully, using a gas leak as cover. Within an hour, the building was empty except for one flat. The top floor corner unit Sarah positioned her team. Listen carefully. Ashworth is dangerous and highly trained. She might have weapons. She might have set traps. We go in careful and controlled. No heroics. But James was thinking about something else. About David Harrow's letter. About how Ashworth had called him weak. About how she talked about sacrifice and the greater good. What if she's not planning to escape? James said suddenly. Sarah turned to him. What do you mean? Think about it. She's been ahead of us every step. She knew we'd find her nephew. She knew we'd trace that call. What if she wanted us to find her? What if this is where she plans to make her final stand? Sarah's face darkened. You think she'll release the documents the moment we breach? Or worse, if she truly believes she's fighting for something bigger than herself, she might have prepared something else. A dead man's switch. A failsafe. At less than 24 hours until the deadline. If they went in now and triggered her backup plan, everything could still be released. But if they waited and she released the documents anyway, they'd failed. We have to try, Sarah decided. Maybe we can talk to her. Get her to surrender peacefully. They approached the door. Sarah knocked. Elizabeth Ashworth. This is Captain Sarah Reynolds, Palace Security. We need to speak with you. For a long moment, nothing. Then a voice came through the door, calm, almost amused. Come in, Captain. The door's unlocked. But only you and Officer Mitchell. Everyone else stays outside. Sarah looked at James. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, James said. He thought of Harrow, of the van at the gate, of how all of this started because he trusted his instincts. This started with me. I want to see how it ends. They entered slowly. The flat was sparsely furnished. A laptop on a table, papers everywhere. And sitting in a chair by the window, backlit by morning sun, was Elizabeth Ashworth. She looked exactly like her photo, but older, tired. There was a sadness in her eyes that pictures couldn't capture. This wasn't a villain. This was someone who'd been broken by what she knew. Please sit, she said, gesturing to chairs she'd positioned across from her. We don't have much time for this conversation. We can end this right now, Sarah said. Just give us the documents. We can work something out. Ashworth smiled sadly. Work something out? Like what happened to me. I tried to work it out. I tried to do things properly. Through channels. Through the system. And what did I get? Forced retirement. My reputation destroyed. My concerns buried. What did you find in that vault? James asked. Ashworth studied him. The young officer who stopped the delivery? You have good instincts. That van driver, Harrow, he was terrified because I showed him what I found. Just a glimpse. Enough to understand what the monarchy really is. So show us, James said. Show us what's so important that a good man killed himself over it. For the first time, Ashworth's composure cracked. Just for a second. Harrow's death was unfortunate. He wasn't supposed to see as much as he did. His conscience couldn't handle it, and yours can. Sarah challenged. I've lived with this knowledge for 5 years, Captain. Every day, every night. Knowing that the institution we're taught to revere, to respect, to protect, is built on a foundation of lies and collaboration with evil. She turned the laptop screen toward them. On it were photographs of documents, letters, bank records, agreements signed by members of the royal family in 1940 and 1941, during the darkest days of World War II. James read in growing horror. The documents suggested that certain royals had maintained secret communications with Nazi officials, had moved money into Swiss accounts, had potentially shared intelligence that could have compromised British operations. This can't be real, Sarah whispered. It's real, Ashworth said. Every page authenticated. Every signature verified. This is what they've been hiding. This is what your king's grandfather spoke of. The secret that could destroy the monarchy. But context, James said, his mind racing. There has to be context. People did desperate things during the war, made impossible choices. That's what I told myself at first, Ashworth replied. That's what I wanted to believe. But the more I investigated, the more I found. This wasn't desperation. This was betrayal. It was covered up, hidden, denied. For 80 years, the truth has been buried. Until now. She reached for something beside her chair. Sarah's hand moved toward her weapon. But Ashworth pulled out only a phone. Old. Simple. A flip phone from a decade ago. This phone is connected to a secure server. On that server are complete copies of every document in the vault. In 3 hours, they will be automatically released to 30 major news organizations worldwide. Unless I enter a code to stop it, what do you want? Sarah asked. What will make you stop this? Ashworth stood up, moving to the window. She looked out at the church, at the morning sun. 8. At the city waking up below. I want the king to tell the truth. To stand before the people and admit what happened. To acknowledge that the monarchy was complicit in heinous acts. And then to step down. To end this charade. He'll never do that, Sarah said. Even if the documents are real, even if the context is damning, he'll never voluntarily destroy the institution. Then the people will destroy it for him, Ashworth said simply. They deserve to know. They deserve to choose. That's what democracy means. James stood up slowly, thought about everything he'd learned over the past week, about Harrow, about the vault, about this woman who'd given up everything for what she believed was right. You're not wrong about the truth, he said quietly. People do deserve to know their history, all of it, even the ugly parts. But Elizabeth, you're wrong about one thing. She turned to face him. What's that? You think releasing these documents will bring justice, accountability? But it won't. It'll bring chaos, division. It'll destroy something that, despite its flaws, still means something to millions of people. And in the end, the truth will get lost in the noise, just like it always does. So what's your solution? Ashworth asked. Keep lying? Keep pretending? No, James said. Create a process, a historical commission. Who can examine the documents, provide context, present findings in a way that serves truth without serving destruction. It might take years, but it would be honest, real. Ashworth laughed bitterly. And you'd think they'd actually allow that? As the very people whose secrets would be exposed? I think James said carefully that the alternative is watching your life's work turn into a conspiracy theory, because that's what will happen. You release those documents, and within hours they'll be called forgeries, or AI-generated fakes. A plot by enemies of the crown, and people will believe it because it's easier than accepting something so terrible. He took a step closer. But if you work with us, if you help create a legitimate process, your name goes down in history as someone who pursued truth the right way, not as a traitor, as a hero. Silence filled the room. Ashworth stared at him, her expression unreadable. Outside, the church bell began to ring. 9 o'clock. 3 hours until the deadline. You're asking me to trust the very system that betrayed me, she said finally. I'm asking you to trust that some of us still care about doing the right thing, James replied. Not the easy thing, the right thing. Ashworth looked at the phone in her hand, at the laptop, at the window. The weight of 5 years pressed down on her. The burden of knowledge, the cost of truth. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, James saw tears. If I do this, she said, her voice breaking, if I trust you and they bury it again, they make me disappear and nothing changes, I'll know I failed. I'll know that David Harrow died for nothing, Sarah said gently. You'll know that you tried to do it right. That you gave people a chance to face their history with dignity instead of chaos. The church bell finished ringing. The last note echoed across the rooftops and faded into the London morning. Elizabeth Ashworth picked up the phone. Her finger hovered over the keys. One code would stop everything. Another would release it all. She looked at James, at Sarah, at two people who represented the system she'd fought against for 5 years. And then she entered the code. The phone beeped. On the laptop screen, a message appeared. Release canceled. Ashworth set the phone down and raised her hands. I want immunity, for myself and for my nephew, and I want it in writing. Oh, signed by the king himself. Done, Sarah said immediately. And I want to be part of the commission. I want to make sure the truth actually comes out. We'll make it happen, James promised. As Sarah called in her team, as Elizabeth Ashworth was taken into protective custody, as the crisis that could have destroyed the British monarchy came to a quiet end, James stood at the window where she'd stood. He thought about the 7 days that had passed since a white van pulled up to the palace gate, about all the lives touched by this, about how close they'd come to disaster. The documents would be examined, the commission would be formed. And someday, years from now, the truth would emerge. Not in a sensational explosion, but in careful, contextualized history. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even completely just. But it was better than the alternative. King Charles met with James personally the next day, thanked him, offered him a promotion, a position in the royal protection detail. James declined. He wanted to stay at the gate, where he could watch deliveries, where he could trust his instincts when something didn't feel right. "You saved the crown," the king said. "Not just by stopping that delivery, but by finding a way to honor truth while preserving stability." "I just did my job, Your Majesty," James replied. The king smiled. "That's what the best people always say." As James returned to his post, as life at the palace returned to its careful routines, he thought about Elizabeth Ashworth, about how easy it would be to see her as a villain. But she wasn't. She was someone who cared too much, who saw injustice and couldn't let it go. Maybe that was the real lesson. History wasn't simple. That right and wrong weren't always clear. That sometimes the best you could do was find a path that honored truth while preventing destruction. The next morning, another delivery van pulled up to the gate. James checked the credentials, verified the contents, logged everything properly. Just another day, just another delivery. Just the way it should be. But he never forgot the white van, the scared driver, the 7 days that changed everything. Some secrets he'd learned were too dangerous to release all at once. But that didn't mean they should stay buried forever. The truth would come out, eventually, when people were ready to hear it. And when it did, James hoped they'd remember Elizabeth Ashworth not as a threat to the crown, but as someone who fought for accountability in the only way she knew how. History would judge them all. But for now, the palace stood. The monarchy survived. And somewhere in a secure facility, documents waited to tell their story when the time was right. The gate closed. The day began. And James Mitchell, the royal guard who'd stopped a delivery that almost brought down a kingdom, went back to watching, always always ready, because you never knew what might arrive next.